everybody. Thank you for coming. This is the June 2025 Q&A on moving to France. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation, where we help people to get the right visa and do all of the admin to follow their dream of living in France. I am the admin of the Americans in France Facebook group, where we have about 23,000 people currently. I host the Profiles in Transformation podcast. I'm the author of Foolproof French Visas, which covers about 30 different visa types that you may be interested in for your move to France. And I'm going to put the link for that in the chat. And of course, I host these monthly Q&As where you can get help and learn about how we work so that when you are ready to start the process of moving to France, you know how we can help you and you can get in touch so that we can put together a proposal and a quote for you. I want to talk before we get started about the event that I'm hosting in 2 weeks that I am very excited about, called the Relocate to France Virtual Summit 2025. And this is a 4-day event from June 16th to 20th from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. France time. So that's 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. approximately Eastern Standard Time. It's 1 p.m. to 7 British Standard Time. It's very early in the morning for people on the West Coast. But the idea is that there are going to be 4 full days of presentations and also the opportunity to go into virtual exhibition stands and meet with the various professionals and companies that can help you on your move, whether that's pet relocation services or currency transfer services, and many of the excellent quality partners that we work with to help people's transformation become a reality. So I'm going to put the link in the chat for you to sign up for that as well. It's free. It's free to attend live. And then what we're doing is we're making the replays available to all of the events. We have about 20 different events and presentations scheduled throughout the 4 days. And if you would like to purchase an all access pass to be able to watch the replays of all of the events that you may or may not be able to attend live, it will be $97. And so upon signing up, you have the opportunity to submit any questions that you have. Even if you can't attend sessions, you just submit questions by topic, and then I will parcel them out to the various professionals who are in charge of those different topics. And there's also going to be a pop-up community on an app called Heartbeat, which is private. It's a group privately owned by me. It's similar to Facebook and has features like Facebook or Slack where you can have posts and chats and whatever. And that's going to be live for the 4 days of the event so everybody can interact with each other during the event. I think it's going to be really fun. I'm very excited. And yeah, we have almost 500 people signed up already. So I'm really looking forward to all of the people that we're going to be able to help along with their project of moving to France. So I hope that you're going to be able to join me for at least some of the sessions during the event. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the questions that you have all submitted in advance. So, Julie, my British husband is applying for a long stay visa married to a French person. Am I right to think that he doesn't need a healthcare plan for the visa as he is married to a French citizen? Yes. So when you are the spouse of a French citizen, it is not a requirement to have a healthcare plan in place for the visa application. And in fact, he will be able to get a healthcare card that will cover him for the first 3 months of his stay oh, and I see that's your next question. What insurance do we need for the 3 months before being able to have SEPAM? So his EHIC card or his NHS coverage will be able to cover him for the first 3 months when he is basically a tourist in France before he becomes eligible for SEPAM. So you can start applying for the healthcare system in France after 3 months. However, it's not going to be finalized anywhere anytime soon. So we do recommend that you get a temporary healthcare policy for at least a couple of months. There are some that are valid for the whole year. There are some that are on a month-to-month basis that you can cancel. And we have a couple of different recommendations, all of whom will be present at the Relocate to France Summit. Or if you want a recommendation, we can introduce you to them by email. I want to differentiate by saying that if you're the spouse of an EU citizen, then the EU citizen and the non-EU citizen partners both have to have private health coverage or be covered by the EU member state in order before they can get onto the French healthcare system. And that's one of the documents that NF will ask for when you're requesting the carte de séjour for your non-EU spouse. You have to prove that you have healthcare coverage outside of France or through a private policy in order to get the carte de séjour. James, I am planning to start working remotely in France about half time. I probably won't spend more than 93 days and 180, but there's a chance this might happen. Should I apply for the entrepreneur visa just in case if there's a downside to this if I live in France half the time? Okay, so I actually already talked about this with James, but I wanted to walk through the answer for all of you. Basically, if you're going with some kind of entrepreneur or work visa, you're going to have a lot of obligations during your first year. So the first thing to know is that if you're a tourist and you're not living and establishing residence in France, you can go to France on business trips for a non-French company if your trips are shorter than 90 days and you're not really doing business or earning money from French clients in France. That is the extent to which you are allowed to work remotely when you are actually on the status of tourist and not trying to establish residence. However, if you want to live in France long term, get on a path to residency and naturalization, have a legitimate French setup so that you can stay longer term and pay social charges into the French system on your earned income in accordance with the French tax treaty with either the US, the UK, etc., then you're going to want to have some kind of French setup where you're going to be able to invoice and then pay yourself a salary or owner's compensation or be self-employed or be declaring and taxing your income in some way. Now, when you have a visa that enables you to set up a business in France, and this is whether it's micro entrepreneur or talent passport entrepreneur or classic entrepreneur, any of the business visa types, you're going to have a lot of French admin to do during your first year. I would highly discourage you from getting one of these visa types if you plan to be traveling around a lot and not actually doing your business. The intention to start the business and get clients is what enables you to obtain the visa. But then when you arrive, you actually have to get clients and earn money and declare income and do all of the administrative formalities required by your visa type in order to maintain and renew the visa. I've noticed that a lot of people, they get the visa and they think that's enough and they keep doing whatever it is they're doing and then they get to renewal and oh, I didn't register my business until 6 months in, or I didn't register it until I got to my renewal appointment, and then they're surprised that one, it takes a long time, two, that doesn't give you a chance to actually show that you've made money, and three, if you have made money, you haven't properly declared it and you are making money under the table, which is basically like the biggest crime that you can commit in France. So really important to think about that in advance and think about what all of the requirements are going to be administratively in order to be successful during your first year. Lisa, if I purchase an apartment in France and I'm only staying half the year, can I allow friends or family members to stay in it when I am not there at no charge, or are there rules against that depending on the building management? I'm apprehensive about leaving it vacant for 3 months at a time. Yeah, so that's going to depend on building rules. It's going to depend on city rules. It's going to depend on how are they getting the keys. Like in a lot of places, lock boxes are illegal now. They have to really not be paying you, and that means like not paying you into a foreign account that you're not declaring in France or anything like that. And the other issue that comes up too is if somebody decides that they like your apartment and they want to live there and they start getting mail and bills there, then all of a sudden you have squatters, and that's a big problem. And there are some reforms in the works about squatter laws, but it's really hard to kick people out if they decide they like to stay. So just be aware of those issues. I mean, obviously it's probably safer with friends or family who are going for 2 weeks on vacation than it is in other situations, but something to keep in mind for sure. Nadia, in France, if I apply for a visa on my own, live there for 5 years, complete the entire process, get citizenship, would my husband be able to apply for citizenship because we're married, or would he also have to spend 5 years there, pass the language test, etc.? Yeah, so if you're married before you become eligible to apply for citizenship and before you become a French citizen, he doesn't get any benefit of being like sort of brought in under your citizenship. He would then be able to get a visa as the spouse of a French citizen, but yeah, he would have to be living there and paying taxes there and passing the language test. The language test is definitely going to be required for all citizenship applications, regardless of age, and even for people applying through marriage. What is the tax law regarding capital gains tax if you sell your house in the US? Okay, so I'm not an accountant. We have had this conversation with accountants, and it's been covered in previous Q&As that I've done with our accountant, Isaac Brashisha of Monceau CPA. So I am going to answer this question with the caveat that you need to absolutely talk to a tax professional about this. The general rule is that if your primary residence is sold within the first roughly 12 months of residing in France, it's considered part of the move over, and the French tax authorities are not going to be interested. That's it if it's your primary residence. If it's your secondary residence, then you can, depending on the situation, you may have a capital gains tax issue because the capital gains tax rules for French secondary residences are different from those for US secondary residences. And similarly, if it's 2 or 3 years that you're living in France and you sell what was formerly your primary residence, it may still qualify as selling your primary residence in the US and you may still get the exemption from capital gains. But in France, it will have already sort of become a secondary residence. And so then the tax rules are different. And part of it depends, the percentage at which the property would be taxed is also going to depend on how long you owned it for and whether or not any part of it was a business. So best advice is to talk to your friendly neighborhood accountant during a consultation and get the specifics from them. Speaking of which, Isaac is going to be doing a presentation on French taxes during the Relocate to France Summit. It's going to be on Thursday, June 19th. We're going to be covering most of the French and US tax issues. So if you are interested in those topics, those would be some good sessions to sign up for. Lily, can my son can my soon-to-be retired husband and myself apply for this visa? I'm assuming you mean a visitor visa because there's nothing specified. Our daughter will transfer college to study in Paris. We assume she will need a student visa. Okay, so if you're retired, then you can absolutely apply for a visitor visa, and you're going to need to show, among other things, proof of temporary housing when you arrive, proof of insurance for the first year, and proof of funds. And we help people put together these applications all the time and help with the admin for when you arrive and the things that you need to do to get set up. In terms of your daughter transferring college to study in Paris, she will need a student visa if that's what she wants to do. It depends a little bit on what type of study and how long she's been studying, and whether or not she is planning to enroll in an L1, which would be the first year of an undergraduate program, or whether she's already done some college classes and wants to see if she can potentially start in an L2 or a different year of university. That's going to depend on getting approval from a commission at the university, and it's going to be a little bit different from each university because basically what they're going to do is a validation des acquis et de l'expérience. It's called VAE, and they're going to look at what coursework she's done, what her work experience is, etc., and figure out how her coursework coincides with what they offer in a particular program and how they can place her and what courses she may be able to opt out of. That's if she's trying to start in the middle of a program. It's not necessarily a good idea. The other thing I want to point out is depending on how much credit she could possibly get for previous studies, you definitely want to make sure that she goes into an academic program where she's completing at least 2 years before earning a degree, because those are going to be some of the criteria to enable her to get more easily sponsored for a job, be able to get a visa type called Recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise once she has finished her studies, so that she can stay in France and look for a job without having to go directly back to the US. Also, Lily, once you apply for your visa in the US and they approve it, how soon do you need to travel to France? Do we need airplane tickets and a place to live secured before applying? So you don't need airplane tickets. You do need a reservation with a start date, and you need to have three things aligned. You need to have your reservation, your start date for your temporary housing, your temporary insurance policy, and the date on your visa application itself all need to be the same. The consulate is going to issue you a visa that starts on the date that you ask for. So you can apply up to 90 days in advance. You can apply for a visa in June and say you're going to leave August 31st. And they'll give you a visa that starts August 31st. So then you need to travel around August 31st. And if it's a couple days after, not a big deal. Liz, can someone with enough passive income, house rental, but more self-employed income, web development, having only one U.S. client and no plans to add more clients in the future qualify for Profession Liberale visa? No. And the reason for that has nothing to do with the passive income. It has to do with the fact that when you are self-employed in France, you are supposed to have more than one client and show that you do not have a link of hierarchy. So if you only have one client and you don't have any French-based clients, you are not going to be awarded a Profession Liberale visa. There are a couple of different options for resolving the situation. One, depending on the level of income, you may want to set up an actual French company that you will then be an employee of, because that will give you a degree of separation from the sort of employer that enables you to show that there's no hierarchical link, that the client is your client and not your boss. Another option could be to set up with a portage salarial, which is you are a salaried employee of this middleman company that collects income from the company abroad and pays your social taxes and makes your pay slips and all of those things. Your salary in that case would have to be high enough to qualify you for a talent passport, carte bleue européenne, a European blue card, which is about 54,000 euros per year. And keep in mind that because of social charges and the fees that the portage costs, it's basically going to cost twice as much to the company in order to pay you that minimum. But yeah, there's a couple of different options for that situation. Liz, for the long stay visa, it sounds like a visitor visa. Remember that long stay visa and VLSTS means visa de long séjour valant titre de séjour. So it's any 1 year visa that you validate when you arrive in France that turns the sticker visa in your passport into a titre de séjour by assigning you an AGDREF number. An AGDREF number is the application de gestion des dossiers des ressortissants étrangers en France. I think that's it. It's in Foolproof French Visas in the list of acronyms. So 1 year visa that is a sticker in your passport that you validate is a VLSTS. And when you validate it, it becomes your first titre de séjour. So that actually refers to about a dozen different visa types. So normally when people say that, you're going to mean visitor visa, but it's much better to specify the type of visa because each one has different requirements. Okay, can a family member use some of their savings or passive income to make up the difference in required minimum income to add to the passive income of a low income family member? Yeah, so if you're in a family situation where you're married and you share resources and whatever, then you can use accounts in different family members' names. I would just say one thing you have to be careful of is that if most of the assets are in one person's name, then you need to actually write an attestation saying that you're married and you're going to cover the living expenses of your other family member. And there's a particular form that we use when people are in that situation and need that to be done. Terry, can I practice U.S. law for U.S. residents while in France? No. You need to be licensed in some kind of way to practice law, whether that's U.S. law, French law, whatever. And you need to have a registered self-employment activity as a legal consultant. Now, it is possible to be something called a foreign legal consultant where you are practicing, for example, U.S. law for U.S. residents. Again, depends on the state. So in order to do that, you would need to submit an application to, I don't know that it's the French bar. I'm not sure exactly what organization, but you would need to put together a file with your credentials and your diplomas and probably get a bunch of things translated in order to be authorized to practice U.S. law as a legal consultant from France. And then you would need to, of course, register a self-employment activity to be able to do so. Bonnie, once accepted into the French healthcare system, is there a monthly annual charge for retired expats? So that depends. If you are working, you're generally paying into the system on the basis of your earned income. And that's why it's really important to make sure that if you are earning money through, whether it's through self-employment or remote work or whatever, that it is being declared and taxed in France because that is subject to French social charges. Now, if depending on the types of income you have, some income may be subject to PUMA, which is the healthcare contribution for Protection Universelle Maladie. And basically, this is a sort of tax on your passive income that exceeds 23,000 euros approximately per person. and that is going to be your healthcare contribution if you are residing in France. Now, there's a couple of ways. Very few people actually pay PUMA. If you are receiving a pension, for example, even if it's a US pension, generally US Social Security pensions, 401ks, IRAs, etc., are all exempt from the PUMA calculation. So if most of your income is from 401k and Social Security distributions, you're not going to be subject to PUMA. The main reason PUMA would come into play is if you are not yet retired and don't yet have Social Security or pension, and you have ginormous amounts of capital gains, dividends, interest, etc., from outside of France, and you don't have any pensions to sort of protect you from PUMA, and you don't have anybody in your family paying into the system. I want to point out too, there's also during the Relocate to France virtual summit, there's going to be one tax talk that talks about PUMA and the PUMA contributions and the different questions related to who might have to pay into the PUMA system. There's also going to be a separate presentation on the French healthcare system and the different types of insurances that you're going to need. Mindy, what documents might we need after we get there for PUMA, etc., that we should make sure we get before we leave? Do these need to be translated and apostilled? Okay, so always make sure that you have your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, any divorce certificates, any name change documents, children's birth certificates, vaccination records, especially for kids who will need them for school. Those are going to be the main ones. Unless you're planning on getting married, you don't, and or paxed, and the town hall might ask for those apostilled. They don't need to be translated or apostilled before you get to France. Now, once you're in France, there are certain administrative procedures where you can submit documents in English. There are others where they're going to ask you for a translation. So it depends a little bit on what you need. And healthcare, for example, they take English birth certificates. Exchanging your driver's license, they want translations. Getting a DCEM, a circulation document for your minor child, they want translations. So it just depends a little bit on the situation. Those are the things you'll want to get before you come. For things like the driver's license exchange, the documents need to be less than 3 months old, so it doesn't make sense to order them before you leave. When our clients get to France, there's a certain number of things we do before we start the process to exchange the driver's license, but we want to start it as soon as we can because it can take 7 or 8 months, and you want it to be complete before it's time to renew your visa. You don't want them to open your file, say, hey, this person's visa is expiring this month. Let's ask them for the updated carte sejour, because if you just submitted your renewal or if you haven't submitted it yet, it's going to take 3 to 4 months at least for you to get the new carte de séjour, and in the meantime, they're going to reject your application for the driver's license exchange. So it's really important to do it early. You submit scans of documents with certified translations done by translators in France, but you don't order those documents until you actually arrive in France, and there's a couple of other things to do in the meantime. Mindy, are people here in France in au pair or student visa eligible for PUMA? So students and au pairs are covered by the healthcare system. Au pairs have to be declared by their families, their host families who pay social charges on their au pair contract. Students can enroll in the healthcare system through being students. So PUMA, the term PUMA is really meant to designate people who are adhering or registering for the French healthcare system without having worked in France, or who don't otherwise have a legitimate into the French healthcare system. So it used to be, for example, that if you were married to a French person, but you were a stay-at-home mom and you weren't working, like you would be something called an ayant droit. So you would have the right to be on the healthcare system, but through your spouse who was working. And now, since 2016, PUMA, Protection Universelle Maladie, means that every individual residing in France has the right to be on the healthcare system as an individual without having to depend on somebody else's enrollment in the French healthcare system. However, PUMA really designates those people who otherwise would have fallen through the cracks. But students, au pairs, self-employed people, people who own businesses, people who are working, they are not considered to be PUMA because they're paying into the system on the basis of their work. Kevin, is it possible for those on a long stay visitor visa to lease a car in France? Are there hurdles for expats? especially with the regular 37-month lease offered by French auto companies. I expect that you would have problems in most places, but that's going to be really up to the company on an individual level. However, do not bring your car to France unless you're British. If you're British, you can bring your car probably. If you're American, do not even think about it. Okay, Chloe. I will have a rental contract in France for 6 months. Will this be sufficient to apply for the visa type? Okay, couple of problems. First of all, there's no legitimate rental contract in France that's valid for 6 months. There's just not. So that's the first major red flag. Second red flag, you need to be validating your visa and doing a lot of French admin starting within 90 days of arrival. And to do most of the French admin, you're going to need to have a long-term address where you can have bills in your name and get mail. So you need to find a long-term address where you can have bills in your name and get mail within those first 90 days and preferably even sooner. That means that having a 6-month contract is not a good idea. There's two possible ways that this 6-month contract is a thing. One is that there's something called a bail mobilité, which is supposed to be for people with short-term work contracts or something like that who have a justification for having a lease shorter than the standard 12 months for a furnished rental, 9 months for a student furnished rental, 3 years for an unfurnished rental. The other possibility is that it is a rental contract for a secondary residence. These are often called bail code civil. And basically what this means is that the landlord and or the rental agency have just decided we're opting out of French rental laws on long-term rental contracts, so we're going to give you a lease as a secondary residence, and therefore you have no rights because they can put whatever the heck they want into these secondary residence leases. Now, if this is the only place that you have to live in France, spoiler alert, it is not your secondary residence. And so these are a way that rental agencies take advantage of foreigners that don't know any better. And like I said, because you need a long-term address where you can have bills and get mail, this is actually going to cause a lot of problems for your French admin during the first year. So my advice typically is get an Airbnb or some kind of temporary rental for 4 to 6 weeks, potentially 6 to 8 weeks if you're going to a really popular area or if you're going during the high season, for example, you may want to give yourself a little bit more time, but use that time in the temporary rental to find a long-term lease as soon as possible, potentially start working with one of our real estate or apartment search agents before you arrive in France so that you have the ability to sign a long-term lease relatively quickly. I did just say don't bring your car to France if you're American. Even if you have an entrepreneurial visa, it doesn't have to do with visa type. It has to do with the fact that in order to get, like, US cars are not conforming to European standards, and it will cost you potentially tens of thousands of euros, and you may or may not ever be able to actually drive your car in France. So don't do it. We have cars in France. Chloe, does this visa work for me if I am a shareholder and business partner in a French SAS consultancy business? Okay, so if you are going to be working in the consultancy business and you're a partner, that means one of two things. Either you have an investment of over 30,000 euros and you have some kind of position in the company and you have a master's degree or 5 years of professional experience, then you're going to be eligible for the Talent Passport Entrepreneur. If your investment is less than 30,000 euros or you don't meet the requirement of having a master's degree or 5 years of professional experience, then you're going to apply for a regular, what I call a classic entrepreneur, which does not have those two requirements. The approval process for that is a little bit longer. So, depending on the level of investment in the business, you would apply for one of those visa types. But yeah, being a shareholder, you can be a shareholder of a French company even without a visa. But if you're actually working for the company and receiving income from the company, then you would need to, and you have especially if you have like a board or a director position for the company that's designated in the statutes, you would need to have an entrepreneur visa. If you can get a certificate of conformity from the manufacturer for your car, then by all means you can try to bring it over. But I would very highly discourage you. And the problem with a 1976 BMW is that it doesn't meet emission standards. And so there are big cities like Paris, Lyon, etc., where you're no longer allowed to drive into certain areas because of emission standards, then you're going to have problems. Don't bring your car. Just don't do it. Don't do it. The app for the Relocate to France virtual summit is called Heartbeat. So it has features that are similar to a Facebook group where people can make a post and you can comment on each other's posts. And then it also has features kind of like a Slack chat where it's just comments in a chat. So we have both set up. We have different topics set up from the different regions to France. That's where all of the RSVPs for the events are taking place. It sends out reminders automatically. And then you can interact both with other attendees and also with the professionals who are going to be presenting during the event. And then the events themselves, the presentations themselves, are hosted either on Zoom webinars or on Zoom breakout rooms. The chats and everything are not active yet. They're only going to be active for the 4 days of the event, and then we're going to close it up and clean it up for next year. So there's not going to be a lot of moderating that I have to do between now and then. Okay, Nazilla. Not all public elementary schools offer French as a second language. In Paris, for the 7th, there's only one elementary school that has this. How do we find the schools that have this? You're going to have to contact the mairie, or there may be a list online. I can see if there's a list online from the department of schools that have UPE2A, but it might change from year to year based on capacity and need and the availability of teachers. So it could very well change from the end of this year to the beginning of next year. To apostille or not, you do not need an apostille unless you're getting married or paxed, or if you have married or paxed, eventually when you're getting naturalized, you would need an apostille. If you have a document from a country that is not known for having reliable and secure documentation, then they could very well want an apostille. Like an Indian birth certificate or something may have different requirements for an apostille than an Australian birth certificate. Most of our clients are US, UK, Canadian, Australian, so we don't really have to deal with too many requests for apostilles. Those are really just reserved for, like I said, people getting married or paxed or naturalizing. Mindy, do you know if a large reptile family pet can be brought into France? I do not. I know we have a resource on this and we talk about the different types of pets. Most people ask me about cats and dogs, so I do not know about reptiles off the top of my head. I know we include it in our client resources and Fast Track to France with a checklist. I also know that it's going to depend on the type of reptile and what you mean by large. Reptiles of any size I would consider large, but other people may have different opinions on that. Angelica, I'm leaving for France in a week. I'm unsure how to set up my finances here to be in the best position to use or transfer money to France with the lease fees. Okay, so we work with two currency exchange specialists, and I can introduce you to them. So typically work with Currencies Direct for people who are transferring large amounts of money for, starting their business, buying property, things like that. And then, yeah, like Wise or Revolut are fine for other amounts. Wise tends to be easy to set up like before you get over that, and you can use your debit card for everyday expenses. Currencies Direct is more like if you want to save a lot of money buying a large amount of euros, if you want to get a bunch of your money into euros now because you plan on buying later in the year, or if you want to lock in an exchange rate well in advance, you can do that. Children do not have to have a background check. And background checks are only for like entrepreneur visas where you're starting a company. Most people do not need a background check for the visa. That comes up every time. 150-pound tortoise. I do not know that would be possible. I have no idea. I just talked to these wonderful ladies last week who have a pet concierge service. They do pet relocation. I would be happy to put you in touch with them. I just met them last week. They seem really, really lovely. And I bet that if anybody can figure it out for you, it would be them. Duff. If both spouses want to work, each of us would need to apply for a Profession Liberale visa. One of us cannot lean on the other's visa for work permission. Correct. So there's two ways that we go about this, and it depends a little bit on the situation. It's true that if one spouse holds a Profession Liberale visa, the other spouse does not automatically get the right to work. So the other spouse would only have the right to a visitor visa or a different visa type that they qualify for in their own right. So two situations. One situation is that both spouses have activities that overlap substantially and that we can easily mesh into one business plan. In that case, what we do is we write the business plan as though you're going to be something called conjoint collaborateur, which means one of you is the main sort of person in the business and the other person is the support or secondary business owner. That is a solution that you can do for 5 years when you are married or in a civil partnership, a legalized civil partnership similar to PACS. Now, in order to do that, so we have two examples of this from our clients. One is we have sort of the more traditional, stereotypical way that this is set up, where the husband is a handyman, and so he's out doing the jobs, and then the wife is doing the invoicing and setting up the appointments and doing the correspondence and all of that. So that's sort of what the conjoint collaborateur or conjointe collaboratrice setup was originally designed for. But we also have a similar situation with one spouse is more IT and tech oriented, the other one is more graphic design related. And so we put them into the same business plan where he's doing like the websites and she's doing the graphic design and the copy and things like that. And that can also work for the same business. So that obviously is less work at the business plan level because you only have to have one business plan and one set of client recommendations and things like that. Now, if the activities are so totally different, which is the case for clients that we just had start working with us, the activities are so totally different that there's no way that we can make them mesh in the same business plan, then yeah, like each person would need their own separate Profession Liberale application. Is our original marriage license enough with copies to submit at an interview? I don't know if you mean like you would need the certificate, so not the original marriage license that has to be like legalized or validated in some way by the state. So usually that means for all of your documents, ordering an official long form document from your state online. Margaret, how difficult is it to extend from year 1 to year 2 and what additional documents are needed? So without knowing the visa type, I don't know. But basically, when you're renewing your visa, they're going to look at are you continuing to meet the requirements for your visa, and they're going to ask for many of the same documents. If you're a visitor, they want to see that you are not working, that you still have income, that you have funds in a French bank account, and either like a lump sum of funds or that you've been making regular transfers over the minimum that they're looking for. If you're self-employed, they want to see that you registered your business, that you started invoicing clients, that you're earning money, that you have projects going on. Like you have to actually continue to do the thing that you got the visa for. So again, one of the things that I've been noticing is people who start the business as the way in, but then they don't hustle to start the business up after they get here. And that's turning out to be a real problem. And the prefectures used to be more lenient about it. And now they are really taking a look at what are you doing? Are you making money? Are you fulfilling the requirements of your visa? Are you focused, etc. And I want to tell you also that we had for the very first time recently, and I knew this was coming, we had for our visitor visa clients who submitted bank statements, French bank statements, they had transferred the minimum amount of money every month, they had a high balance, whatever. And the prefecture came back and said, can you provide documents showing the origin of these funds? So they are starting to figure out that some people are working abroad and not reporting it, and they want to see like the French tax declaration or the pension statement or whatever that justifies this amount of money coming in. Can I consult now with inheritance taxes expert in order to best understand the process? Yes, so I would recommend coming to our session on inheritance taxes and estate planning that's going to be in during the Relocate to France virtual summit. I believe her session is going to be on Wednesday at 4:30 in the afternoon, France time. She's really great. It's a notaire that I met through LinkedIn. I had a chat with her a few weeks ago. She's really knowledgeable. She works with a lot of Americans. Her English is excellent. So I would recommend coming and listening to the presentation first so you understand the basic situation and then booking an appointment with her afterwards. Kelly, how can I find statistics on the frequency of home robberies? That's a good question. I mean, you can Google like best and worst places to live in France, and they have statistics on a lot of those things. What is a good resource to find personal property insurance during the 3-month temporary lodging for the visa? So if you have an Airbnb or something, you should be covered by their insurance or the rental insurance. And then you would need renter's insurance when you sign your own lease. Corinne, have you had direct experience with someone on a visitor's visa switching to a Profession Liberale visa before their first renewal? Bad idea. Do not do it. Arriving in France after a month or two, starting the process and getting a work authorization from a NEF? No, absolutely not. That is a good way to get a ticket home. You need to renew, if you come on a visitor visa, you need to renew your visitor visa at least once. When you get the new card, you can make an appointment to change your status. In Montpellier, that's probably going to be like, I don't know, 4 months after you get the card, 3 months after you get the card, and then submit your change of status application. But yeah, no, absolutely not. Do not plan on changing in the first year. That is basically considered visa fraud, that you came with the wrong intentions. Jennifer, I need to leave the US by November 1st. I will not have health insurance. I'm fond of not dying. I have a self-employment business plan. It is shaping up to meet France's income requirements. I do not speak any French. Okay, Jennifer, this sounds like something we need to have a consultation about to determine the best type of visa. But yeah, there's no such thing as a digital nomad visa. If you come on a student visa or a visitor visa, you're not allowed to be self-employed or work remotely. So you would want to have the Profession Liberale visa in order to do that. And part of that would be having potential for clients and business in France. Note that when you're on a Profession Liberale visa or when you're on any type of work visa or business visa, what the prefecture is looking at is the money that you are making from your business. So if you're on an artist visa, but you have Social Security income, they don't care about your pension when they're determining whether or not to renew your visa. What they care about is, did you set up the artist activity? Are you invoicing? Are you doing what you said you were going to do? And are you meeting the minimum income requirements for that visa type? If you register an auto entrepreneur activity, but then you're like, I don't really need to work very hard because I have my rental income from the US that totally covers my expenses. Well, then you're going to have a real problem renewing because you didn't meet the requirements of your visa and you're going to potentially be asked to leave France. And I've seen some YouTube videos and things about people who weren't making very much money and all of a sudden were asked to leave and they were surprised. And I'm like, well, you didn't meet the requirements anymore. And in some cases, they never did, but because they had other funds or because they weren't relying on the French government and weren't getting aid, didn't think that it was going to be a problem. But Kristen, all right, let's see how many. All right, I have a couple more questions on this page, and then I think there might be one or two in the chat that I can go get. So we should be able to cover them all. Kristen, my husband and I own a house in France in January and sold our house in the US. Is the lump sum of cash from the house sale enough to qualify for VLSTS? Again, I assume you mean visitor visa. Or are they still looking for regular monthly income? Yes, a lump sum of cash is totally fine. It does need to be liquid though. If it's in securities and things like that and you can't access it, or it's in investment accounts or whatever, they're not going to take it into consideration because it could lose value. We're going to be renting our secondary home in the US while we live in France. Do the French authorities look at whether property is managed by a rental company or not? No. I thought I read somewhere that you need to use a management company if you are in France as inactif VLSTS. Okay, so if you're on a visitor visa, rental income is considered passive, and rental income from the US is taxed in the US. It's reportable on your French taxes, but it's taxed in where the property is located. Kenza, am I able to engage in options trading while retired in France? Yes, it's taxable in the country. It's taxable in the US if they're US stocks. If you have stocks, bonds, etc., that are not US companies, even if you use your US brokerage account to invest in like the European stock market, that could very well be taxable in France per the treaty. So you need to pay attention to that. The other thing to consider is, will your US brokerage account and stock account allow you to engage in trading in that capacity while you are residing in France? And that is a question your bank can answer. If I sell my US home and become a French tax resident the same year, will I owe French taxes on the sale? No. What is the proper timing of the sale of a US home to avoid French taxation? Within the first year of living in France. Lori, we have not moved to France yet, planning a full move within 1 year. We own a small apartment in the Pyrenees. We are at the early stages of thinking about running a laverie. We're hoping to apply for a visitor visa, but that's not a good idea, and we should probably start with an independent work visa. Yeah, if you're running any type of business, you would need to have a business visa. I would expect that a laverie would have significant business expenses and capital and would not be a good candidate for Profession Liberale. You would want to start an actual company, which means entrepreneur or passport talent entrepreneur. Plan B or C is working as an independent contractor travel agent. Two friends of mine that own a travel agency in the States. If we own a US-based business, could we invoice my friends whenever I book travel for them and have that business be considered our auto entreprise? That sounds like a bad idea for several reasons. One is travel agencies are really regulated in France, and if you are providing services that include lodging or transportation, you're going to be classed as a tour operator, which means you need special types of insurance and authorization in order to run that part of the business. It's also generally not a good idea to have that as a micro entreprise because of one, liability issues, two, the cost of insurance and the amount of capital that you need to have in order to legally run that side of the business, and three, liability. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea to discuss these plans further in a consultation, as you mentioned, to develop some of these business ideas further. Ismar, can I ask for a change of status from salarié to vie privée sooner than 4 months than my visa expires? We are getting married and we have 9 months of vie commune. I would not recommend it because, well, if you're getting married and have 9 months of vie commune, then how? Because if you've, I'm not sure on the math of that one, but technically, yes, you can request a change of status to vie privée after the marriage if you can show 6 months of vie commune. In reality, it depends on how long it takes them to give you an appointment to get you an appointment, and it depends on the prefecture. And I don't know the individual timelines of the different prefectures. Valerie, I have Italian dual citizenship and American citizenship, and my husband only has US. What would be the process for us to move to France regarding visas? So you would have to move to France, find a long-term lease in your names, and get bills in your names. You would have to be covered by a private healthcare policy, and then your spouse, your US citizen spouse, would have to request a carte de séjour as the spouse of an EU citizen. And that has to be done in France and cannot be done, none of it can be done before you leave. Any work or job would be our online photography business unless he is offered an acting job. So he would have the ability to work after he gets his carte de séjour, but that's going to take a few months. He would be able to register as self-employed though as well after getting the receipt that his application for his carte de séjour was accepted and is complete. So in that case, he would be able to start working or register a self-employment activity, which would be required for being able to run your online business. All right, I'm going to look and see what other questions were not answered. My question on savings, okay, Liz, my question on savings covering family members with lower income, your answer is yes for married person. My question was for a family of all adults in the family, none are dependents. Can one person's savings count towards their lower passive income? Yes, you can write a financial support attestation for another adult who is on a visitor visa. What is the minimum income for a family of three, husband's retired, daughter going to college? I would say you probably want at least 2,500 to 3,000 a month for that situation and in a lump sum in cash. Technically, the requirement to have about 1,500 per month net, that's net monthly minimum wage in France is about 1,500 per month. Technically, that can cover a couple with one child. Since your daughter is an adult, I would say a little bit more, but it doesn't have to be necessarily 2 times minimum wage, but it's probably better to get up there. Any information about the timelines now that the visa company has changed? No, I have no idea. Every visa center has its own timeline for releasing appointments and what the availability is. So we take a look at that whenever we have appointments to be made. If you were married and divorced over 4 decades ago, do you need copies of marriage and divorce certificates? If you changed your name and you didn't change your name back to your maiden name after divorce, then yes. Karen, how long to expect for URSAF to have the documents needed? As I don't have a social security number, how long does it take for me to get the titre de séjour? Both of those things take as long as they take. And that's pretty much the answer to everything in France. What is the timeline? How long do things take? They take as long as they take. And that's the only answer that there is. Mindy, will we be able to subscribe to the summit videos after the fact if we miss some that we want to see, for example? Yes. Yeah, that will be available until probably the week after the event. Marcia, is it possible to go to France on a visitor visa, then renew for a second year on the basis of an employed visa without returning to the home country? You would need to renew the visitor visa first, and then you would need to change your status. And generally, that's going to take a really long time and annoy your potential future employer. So, if you have the potential for a job offer approaching the end of the first year, my recommendation would be you let your visa expire, you go back to the US and you reapply, or you go back to your home country and you reapply. Margaret, if I am granted a visitor visa and in month 7 or 8 decide it's not for me and go back to the US, is there anything in particular I need to do reporting to the authorities? So if you're going back at that stage, then usually it's things like we're sending, if you got your healthcare card, we're sending it back. If you, if your driver's license exchange was in process, like you're just not completing the final step. Usually if month 7 or 8 is kind of when things that you did upon arrival start to be complete. Yeah, it's usually a question of not finishing the process and not doing the final step if you're leaving. Angelica, if I start a YouTube channel and gain income from that eventually, do I have to claim that and how would I do that in France? Yes, you would have to have a visa that enables you to be self-employed. You could register as a self-employed content creator and you would report all of your YouTube income in France as an auto entrepreneur. Following up on my question, if change of status in country isn't possible within the first year, can I apply for a Profession Liberale from the US even if I was just granting a visitor visa? No. Yes, it is too late to start a business. You have to wait until your visa expires. So your best option right now is to go back to the US at the end of the year, have your business plan and all of your documents ready, and then reapply for the visa as soon as your first visa expires. But no, you can't. If you have a visa in progress, you can't just change your mind about it 2 months later and decide, oops, I applied for the wrong visa type. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Instead of renewing with the prefecture after a year. So your two options on a visitor visa is either you renew the visitor visa, you wait till you get your new carte de séjour, you make an appointment at the prefecture after receiving your new carte de séjour, and then you submit your business plan and try to do the whole change of status thing. That will take multiple months. So realistically, 18 to 20 months after arrival is the earliest you would be able to start your business activity. 18 to 20 months after the start date on your initial visa. Alternatively, if you return to France at the end of a year, if your visa expires on July 1st, you can apply for a new visa on July 2nd. So it would potentially save you 6 months or so, but then you lose the year that you have accumulated in terms of that would otherwise count towards residency and naturalization and all those other things. So it really depends, but this is why it's really important to make sure that you understand the visa types and know what you're getting yourself into before you apply, because if you apply for the wrong visa type, you're stuck for at least a year and a half, 2 years, basically. And I see it over and over. And no, you can't start a business, and no, you can't start working remotely, and no, if somebody gets you a really great job offer. We actually had this situation with somebody where she came and we set up a business, and 3 or 4 months later, she was getting on a call with me like, okay, now I got a job offer from one of my clients. What do I do? And I was like, well, there's nothing to do. You can't take the job. Don't start a business if you intend to find a job, and don't get a visitor visa if you intend to start a business, and don't come on a student visa if you intend to be self-employed. There's a reason that we wrote foolproof French visas, and there's a reason why there's about 30 different visa types that each have specific things that you're allowed to do and not do and all of that. So I'm going to give you the link to foolproof French visas again in the chat. And again, the link to the Relocate to France virtual summit so that you can sign up for that. Okay, I have 2 more questions here in the chat, and then I will let you all go until next month. Angelica, if I rented a 2-bedroom apartment in France and wanted to lease one of them out, is that considered passive income? You would have to have the landlord agree to that, which they're probably not going to. They would probably want to manage the lease between roommates themselves. But subletting, typically you have to have approval from the landlord, and it's generally not a good idea. Is there anecdotal feedback on how many years one can fail to deliver on business income? No. Can one keep earning 1,000 euros per year and still get renewed? I would not want to take that bet. The expectation is that you're earning 1,800 euros a month for on a Profession Liberale. So if you're earning like 5% of that, then I would expect to receive an OQTF and be asked to leave France. And that's actually, I've seen two or three Americans on YouTube who have had that kind of situation where they were not making the money. And there was one girl who made a very sad video about being kicked out of France for being poor. But no, what the actual story is that she's been auto entrepreneur for quite a number of years and never made much money and is surprised that now France is enforcing the minimum income requirements. I mean, we do have clients occasionally for whatever reason who have good reasons for not getting their income up in the first year. For example, we had one client who she arrived and she found a place to live, and then she had like a couple hundred hours of OFI language classes, and then she bought an apartment and did her integration days. And so she barely had any time to work on her business during the first year. She ended up deciding on her own that she would rather be on a visitor visa and that she didn't actually want to work that hard. So we were able to switch her to that proactively. But and then we had another client who set up a business that required a lot of like machinery and tools and work to be done on the studio in her apartment. And so she got a 1 year visa, but not everything was done by the end of the first year. But in that case, she was able to show that the work had been done and that the activity was progressing, even though there was no like income or profit into the business yet. So it really depends on the situation. But if you are consistently not making money, then I would not expect to get renewed. And if the trend would need to be going up. All right, last two questions and then I'm closing us out. Deirdre, if I have a CDI period d'essai, will that help me with renting an apartment without a guarantee? No. If you're in your period d'essai, landlords typically do not take that into consideration. Once you're out of your period d'essai, especially if you're a fonctionnaire, then that's like the golden ticket. But in the period d'essai, it is really sketchy. Not sketchy, but it's not as strong. If your husband is a fonctionnaire, like maybe there are special guarantees or services for guarantees rather than using a private service like GuarantMe. Margaret, final question. As a US citizen born in Mexico, will I need my birth certificate translated and with an apostille for an extension of a visitor visa? I would say you at least want to have your birth certificate translated. You might as well get it with an apostille if you can, because it's obviously harder to get a document apostilled after the fact if they ask for it. Whereas if you get one with an apostille in the beginning and you have it, then, better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. All right, cool. So thank you so much for coming. Again, please do come and join me at the Relocate to France virtual summit from June 16th to 19th, right here in my very own Zoom. I'm going to share with you really quick before we go some of the presentations that we have. Not all of them are on the app or the website yet, but I'm going to tell you what they are. So every day we're going to have a kickoff event where we're going to talk about the different presentations for the day and get everybody in the mood and excited. We're starting off on Monday with Visa Types for Moving to France by yours truly. We have our virtual exhibition hall from 3 to 5. We have Moving Your Pets and Belongings to France, the key to your rental dossier in France, visa insurance in the French healthcare application system. I have one spot I'm waiting for a confirmation, and then we have our wrap up for the day. We have self-employment and starting a business. We have why, how, and where to buy property, nurturing your mindset and language learning, finding your dream rental property, retirement relocation panel, where we're going to talk to a few of our previous clients who have moved to France about their experiences. We also have a business relocation panel where people who have moved to start businesses are also going to share their experiences and their first couple of years in France. We have maximizing purchasing power with financing and currency. So if you're looking to buy a home and you want to learn about the options for mortgage and currency transfer, that would be a great presentation to attend. We have education and parenting. We have introduction to Puma, international estate and inheritance planning, insuring your life in France, visa application process and timeline, financial planning for Americans in France, intro to French taxes, US taxes for Americans in France, advocacy on voting, banking, and taxes for Americans, and your successful first year in France, where we're going to talk about all of the things that you need to do in your first year to make it a success. So I really hope you'll join me. It's going to be very exciting. We have a lot of great presentations lined up. And as I said, you can submit questions starting right when you register so that I can just sort them by topic and dispatch them off to the appropriate presenter before the talk. And then, of course, you do have the opportunity to meet with professionals in their individual breakout rooms as well. So I do hope you'll join me. And if you can't, the next or the last Q&A of the 2024-2025 season is going to be on Monday, July 7th. It will be at 7 p.m. France time. I will be hosting from the US, so it'll be after lunch my time. And then August we take off. This Q&A has been recorded. It will be edited and then posted on our YouTube channel in the upcoming days. So do take a look for it. And if you need recommendations, like I said, I talked to a couple of you about introductions for currency transfer and buyer's agent and home purchasing and things like that. I can make those introductions by email. Okay, so I hope to see you at the Relocate to France virtual summit in a couple of weeks. And please do submit your questions for it. Thanks and have a good night.